2, 1, and all right, we're on.
Yo, did you collect any uterine materials today?
Well, that's just where we're gonna start with. It's been a little bit of heavy news week, but I think that's one of the major stories that we need to go ahead and get into. Obviously, with our whole show being dedicated to the passing of RBG, we didn't get to a lot of these bigger stories that have come out. But yeah, one of I guess a good place to start is on the whistleblower. Her name's Dawn Wooten, came forward and reported that there was a staggering number of hysterectomies that were happening in an ICE facility in Irwin. The quote from her was, "We've questioned among ourselves, like, goodness, he's taking everybody's stuff out." That's his specialty. He's the uterus collector.
You talk about in the complaint a hearing from women who are detained there, talking about a specific doctor performing hysterectomies, referring to him as a uterus collector. Tell us about how you heard about this doctor and what women said about their experiences with him.
You have detained women. I had several detained women on numerous occasions that would come to me and say, "Miss Wooten, I had a hysterectomy. Why?" I had no answers as to why they had those procedures. And one lady walked up to me here this last time around between October of 19 until July the 2nd. And she said, "What is he? Is he the uterus collector? Does he collect uteruses?" And I asked her, what does she mean? And she says, "Everybody that I talk to has had a hysterectomy." And you just don't know what to say. I mean, I don't have a answer for why that they would come to me and they would say, "Is he the uterus collector?"
The way she talks, like she's not making that up. Like,
no, I don't think there's any question that she's not making that up. I mean, it's insane.
I mean, it's pretty much like the most textbook villainous thing you could do. You know, it's like Nazi shit, right?
Well, that's what that's where my mind went on it right away.
We're coming up, like, if your plan was to like come up with something to make ICE look bad, that's what you would do.
But it's crazy that you don't have to make anything up. They're just that freaking horrible. Yeah. I mean, people want to talk about like abolishing ICE is like some kind of controversial thing.
Yeah, no fucking way. It's like
no. I mean, there is among the allegations from Wooten were jarring amounts of medical neglect in addition to all these hysterectomies.
Did you hear though? Like, I don't know if you saw. I think Kyle did a video on it, right? Mm-hmm. And he mentioned something about how it might just be insurance fraud.
Yeah, like, he said something about like, is it
cheaper? He just took like one of those things in, right?
Well, he took more of like a middle ground approach to it. He was all talking about like, is this eugenics? And if they're really trying to just prevent birth,
is that a question? It's definitely eugenics.
It's
right?
definitely, but the way he was talking about, like, yeah, the fraud aspect of it was one thing.
I think it's both.
But the other part of it that he mentioned, and I thought it was like a little naive, was if they really just wanted to prevent pregnancy, why wouldn't they just go and implant a bunch of IUDs into these women? And the answer was plain obvious to me. It's because an IUD, you can remove that. You can't, it's a lot more difficult to have like a uterus transplant. I don't even know that's possible.
It is possible. I just saw, I mean, it's been done before because I just saw some article about trans women are asking for it.
Right.
So they've done it. They've proven it out with just other women whose uteruses were broken. Mm-hmm. They've gotten implants, but
it's a much more difficult process. And you're talking about some,
not a doubt.
For an immigrant woman that's coming across.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they thought, I don't know if that's what they thought. I think it was just, I think it was both. I think it was eugenics. Like, I don't think it was like, I don't know if that was like they told him to do it. I don't know if it was like a top-down assignment. I think this was just a fucking Nazi doctor. But like, I think he was also milking the government for as much money as he could, right? Like, if you can charge $10,000 for a hysterectomy or $1,000 for an IUD, you're going to do the $10,000 thing, right? Especially because if your motive is to keep these women from having children and make money, you're going to do the permanent one, like before you even get to the cost. But like, That's how all this government shit works,
So-
man. Like it costs $1,000 for a toilet seat for the army. You know, like these companies all. And I'm not making that up either. Like literally, it costs
Right.
$1,000 per toilet seat. Like these companies all overcharge the government as much as they can get away with. Like,
How do you get funding for something like this? You don't actually think they spend $20,000 on a hammer, $30,000 on a toilet seat, do you?
Like that's one of the things that radicalized me was like when I was into space stuff, like, you know, like 2015 around then, like you see just how much these fucking companies were charging for services that like, you know, like SpaceX was doing for like a fourth of the price. And, you know, it's because they're, you know, like not following labor laws, right? But still, like there's a middle between those two.
Well, okay, I want to just get in some of the word in from these
Just
from
these
the
companies
well
kind of reason. Hold on.
well, I mean, I wanted to get in some of the word from the people that were reporting from there that actually were at the facility. He said, when I met all these women who had the surgeries, I thought this was like an experimental concentration camp. The woman said that immigrants in Irwin are often sent to see one particular gynecologist outside the facility, and it was like they were experimenting with their bodies. They said a woman who ended up with a hysterectomy was not properly I'm gonna have a problem with this word, anesthetized, and overheard the doctor say that he'd taken out the wrong ovary, and the woman had to go back and get her other ovary removed as well. And we've questioned among ourselves, like, goodness, he's taken everybody's stuff out. That's his specialty. He's a uterus collector. I know that's ugly. And is he collecting these things or something? She continued. Everybody sees he's taking all their uteruses out and he's taking their tubes out. So I mean, it's just like what you said. It's almost to a point where it's a caricature of an evil mustache twirling villain.
Yeah, no, it's literally like that's the most evil thing you could think about, right? Like, I mean, I don't know what else, like what would be worse than that, like aside from just like gassing people, you know? Like,
Yeah. And then the tweet that I can give me credit for this one that I sent out from the show was when you have to figure out a new way to genocide, because it's essentially what I'm saying.
Well, that's like the debate this whole time was about like whether or not they're concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Chris Hayes, like I saw somebody retweeted something from him the other day, was like him being like basically telling people not to call them concentration camps.
Right.
Like, look, that's a very like controversial opinion or whatever. And it's not. It's 2020, right? Concentration camps now are not going to look like they did 100 years ago because we have different, real life conditions. So
yes,
they're still crowding these people in these fucking cages with, COVID running rampant. And like, if you hear about the conditions too, like, our episode we did with Johnny, like you heard enough bad shit about prisons. Now I'm pretty sure nobody would argue that these camps are even worse. Right. Like, that's what you do when you want people to die, or you have a reckless disregard for whether they live or not. Right.
Yeah. And our word from one of our favorite Congress people.
It's also the money too, though, right? There's also the prison industrial complex.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the word from one of our favorite Congress people here was, it's astounding that after a massive family separation operation, massive sexual assault of detainees, trapping immigrants in COVID-infected detention centers, and now reports of mass hysterectomies, which the U.S. has apparently done before, abolishing ICE is controversial. Where's the line? Oh, that's from AOC.
That was AOC. Yeah, like what more do you want from them? Like, I mean, I guess the response would be, it doesn't mean you have to abolish ICE, right? Like, you put in oversight. Like, that's the problem is, like, they know how this shit works, right? Like, you set it up with no oversight. Like, we can segue into our next story about the money laundering at the banks.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
it's
the same thing. It's like, it's like even better than having captured regulatory agencies. You just don't have an agency at all, right? Like, that's what could be better than having somebody corrupt is having nobody at all. So there's nobody checking on most of this shit, and that's what they do on purpose, right? That's like why they privatize stuff. They do it to make money, but they also do it because it's less oversight.
Yeah, and well, the last word I wanted to throw in from ICE was there was a crucial witness in an ongoing investigation into the allegations of sexual assault and harassment at a detention center that's here where I live in El Paso, and they went ahead and deported him.
Yeah, sounds like something they would do. Yeah. Like, And that's another thing I mean is like there should be somebody in charge of making sure that doesn't happen. Like this is a material state's witness. You can't deport them until the trial's over. But they purposely have that link in the chain severed so that there's no accountability. They don't have somebody in there. It's just they can do whatever they can get away with, basically. And that's the same everywhere. It's man, every week it's just like everything we talk about is just like you see just how fucking further deteriorated the country is and all of our institutions.
Yes, and now speaking of those institutions that you were mentioning, there was a major leak from the FinCEN files. This is the regulatory agency that is supposed to go and monitor what all these financial institutions are up to. And these files showed that the banks, the big banks, allowed $2 trillion in suspicious transactions. And the leak revealed that all these major banks allowed oligarchs, mobsters, criminals, terrorists to launder money in transactions worth more than $2 trillion. Some of the banks that were mentioned in the leak were Deutsche Bank, J.P. Morgan, Deutsche Bank, yep, J.P. Morgan Chase, Standard Chartered, Bank of New York Mellon, Barclays, HSBC, Bank of China, Bank of America, Citibank, and Wells Fargo. That's all of them. I mean, that's every single bank basically. And the worst offender was Deutsche Bank.
Deutsche Bank is fucking.
Deutsche Bank apparently laundered $1.3 trillion for these different criminal organizations.
Yeah, they're the El Chapo of money launderers. Like, I don't even know. It's another one of those things. Like we were just saying. Like, they know how to catch this. Obviously, like their reports were followed, right? Like they reported, hey, this is a sketchy transaction, but nobody followed up with it because the white collar cops have been defunded for years now. Nobody does this shit. Like they talk about looting and rioting and all. This is so much more harmful and but violent, right? Like the crimes that they're enabling is violence, right? Like I'm not going to be a little like rad lib and say like they're doing violence to me, but like in terms of like destructive capability, like their crimes are so much worse than anything you or I could even engage in. Like like a regular person doesn't have access to $1 trillion to steal.
Yeah, I know it, and there's a reason why these people. Look, I'm just going to be straight out about it. I don't think anybody's going to really go to prison for this.
No, of course not. Nobody went to prison for 2008 when they were short selling themselves. Like they were, one side of the company was selling shit and the other company was like buying it. Like exactly. Like that is under any way you look at it, under any finance laws, at any point in time, that's illegal, highly illegal, especially the stakes that they were playing with, and nothing happened. So of course they're not going to do shit about some money laundering. Like that's what the Trump family business is, right? Like they make money from the naming rights and stuff for their brand, but most of what they do is move money around for rich douchebags, right? Like,
the reports cover.
Why do you think he hasn't put his taxes out this whole time? That's why.
You could look at reports about how many financial dealings he had with the worst offender here, which was that Deutsche Bank. And these were 2,000 suspicious activity reports that occurred between the year 2000 and 2017.
So just in the last 17 years, or just in those 17 years?
Yes. These are all 2,000 transactions. So if you do the math, what's the average for, it's an average. The average transaction of $2 trillion if you take off for 2,000 transactions.
Basically, like $100 billion a year.
Yeah, that's exactly what it per transaction.
Shit's going down in Seattle right now. The cops are gassing them.
Well, fuck. With that, we should probably go and segue over onto the state of a civil unrest, which has occurred now after.
You're endangering my drywall.
The verdict of the Breonna Taylor officers.
Yeah.
She was recently awarded a civil settlement of $12 million, where the city, I guess, that's their way of taking accountability by throwing money out from taxpayers to pay out these settlements, as opposed to taking these out of police budgets.
Yeah.
But the indictment, there was one officer that was indicted for wanton endangerment. It wasn't anything to do with murdering Breonna Taylor in her sleep. None of these officers were indicted for that. It was wanton endangerment, which basically came across to me as they indicted him for the shots that he missed.
Yeah, he might have hit like neighboring white bystanders. Like,
yes, that's what it amounts to.
Are the worst. Like of all the cops I've ever interacted with, the ones in Louisville are the worst, man. They're fucking so corrupt with zero accountability and just nobody to even try to pressure them. They get away with fucking murder, clearly murder. I mean,
she was injured there for a while, and
yeah, that's the sick
was,
part. She fucking laid in the hallway bleeding out, like probably crying.
She was bleeding out and
These
everything.
cops are fucking digging around looking for drug money.
She never saw an emergency care worker.
You know,
She,
like it sounds to me like
she
shit out of Training Day.
I mean, she was never. I mean, she never even saw an emergency care worker. That was what it came down to. She just was left to bleed out.
Like,
and
it sounds like some Training Day shit, like the climax of Training Day. That's what it sounds like. They thought there was drug money there, and some crooked plainclothes cops were trying to go fucking jack the money. And
I don't think that's talked about enough, because that's
what they were doing. Why were they there in the middle of the night with no warrant, fucking like no identification?
But they were playing clothes, right?
Yeah, they didn't even say cops. No, of the 11 neighbors they interviewed, only one of them said they heard them say anything about being cops, and that sounds like it was bullshit. Everybody else said they heard banging. They didn't even knock on the door. They blew the hinges off the door with like explosives.
Without warrants.
They didn't say cops. They didn't say anything. And of course the guy shoots at them. You know, like I guess that's what everything rests on, is they were shot at, so that's self-defense or whatever. But like the theory of the case has to be it's murder to it's negligence to it's reckless, and you know it's more than negligence. It's reckless to allow that no-knock warrant to go off under those conditions, right? Like that's the part where it's culpable.
I mean, as far as we were talking about like the mens rea of this thing, I mean, where would you even come down on it? Because if you're talking about just anybody, right? If you're not talking about cops, if you're talking about just anybody going and doing what they did, at that point it's knowingly.
I guess you would have to say, if it was a regular person who was breaking into my house, right, then you would be able to, like, then it'd be felony murder, right?
Yeah,
like, that's
exactly.
The thing here. If this was a like that's basically why the felony murder rule exists for situations like this.
Well,
like
if you're robbery, but breaking and entering.
Yeah, if somebody dies in the commission of your felony, you can be charged for their murder, right? Like, to give you the murder charge for basically the recklessness causing that criminal dangerous situation to arise. So the cops should be culpable of that, right? That's what they were doing. They were recklessly endangering it, and so was the judge who issued the warrant. Like, I'm not sure. It sounds to me kind of like the warrant was issued retrospectively.
Yeah,
like they knew they fucked up and they found out she was dead. So then they went and quick covered their asses and got this warrant.
And well, the response from the community has been pretty. It's been about as what you would expect considering the climate right now.
I mean, I would expect more, right?
Well, just to go
like there was much violence, right? Like,
well, just to go and touch on the violence, actually, because I mean, there was a shooting of 2 Louisville police officers by.
Supposedly.
Well, the suspect they have in custody is named Lorenzo Johnson. We'll go ahead and post a video here.
Where y'all scattering folks? Going this way.
They're going to arrest you, man. They're going to arrest you. And the more y'all set up and post, they're getting ready to come from everywhere else. Here they come. Oh, they shot guns at them. Oh, guns at them, real guns. They're blasting at the police. They shot real guns at him. The police is here to the left.
Look at my squad!
They busted on him. They busted him. They shot at the police. They didn't shoot in the air. They shot at them. They shot at them. I'm talking about.
Apparently, let off several shots, hitting 2 officers. There are non-fatal wounds. And another protest that was going on as a result of the indictment, there was an officer that was hit in the back of the head with a bat,
Yeah, it was pretty epic.
and there was a protester that was run over, had his head run over by a cop.
The cops, as usual, are covering themselves in glory. Like, the fact that they have not, like, these nationwide protests have been going on for months about police brutality, and they still won't curb themselves at all. Like, you would think that they would be issuing commands, hey, don't fuck anybody up, don't shoot anybody, be nice to the protesters. And I don't know what's worse. I don't know what's worse, the fact that they are not responding to that, or that no one's given that order, you know? Like, they are just getting objectively worse. Like, I've never seen this kind of brutality my whole life. Like, you know.
I mean, this is stuff that if you read into the deep dives in the 60s, that it feels more in place there.
Yeah.
You're talking about just sheer brutality that you're seeing from the cops.
The difference is, though, like, back in the 60s, it wasn't multiracial, right? They were like race riots. So the cops would go in and, you know, let the dogs out.
You had the freedom riders
that complained about it. Well, yeah, some of that stuff, but like the MLK riots, like the big ones, like those were black people rioting in black neighborhoods, right? Like, so the cops had, you know, they got away with more than they are now, especially now that everybody's live streaming it. Like, we're seeing it all happen, and it's, you know,
one of the
working
cases
class,
from back then that you even saw like some major headway come in was when you had a couple of, I think there were freedom riders that were killed by the KKK, along with the black kid that they were riding around with, and then the KKK killed all of them. And then when America saw two white kids get killed, then that's kind of when it would spur into action of all the different reforms. And then you had the federal government come down on them.
You know, when that old guy got knocked on his ass in Buffalo earlier in the summer, right? Like, that seemed like it kind of spurred a lot of popular support for Black Lives Matter. But, you know, we've kind of lost that since then. But, like, the Democrats, this goes back to Biden, like we were saying, like him trying to, you know, do an arms race with Trump about who's tougher on the protest, like who's tougher on crime, has led to the situation where there's nobody drawing attention to the problem, and they're buying into the framing that these are violent riots that need to be put down, and they shouldn't have any sympathy. So it's gotten to the point now where all the brutality on them is justified because they shouldn't be there doing it in the first place. Why are they rioting? And it's sick, man. Like, that just shows you the rightward drift in a microcosm, right? Like, when you buy into the right-wing framing, it moves the country to the right, and it's not a good look. Right?
Well, one of the right-wing framings too that has, you know, been pretty prevalent is Trump trying to frame Biden as some kind of far leftist, and you saw that kind of play out with the bullshit that they pulled over here in Minnesota, where on one of these houses there was a spray painted on the garage of Biden 2020 BLM, and then an A with a circle, which I guess is supposed to be anarchy, which if anybody with any kind of common sense knows that no self-respecting anarchist is going to go and say vote for Biden.
No, exactly. There's no fucking way this was anybody but them. Like, this was an obvious right-wing hit job. Like, and that's the thing. It's like with the protests, it's like they keep trying to say everything is violent, right? But like the people who have done like the, you know, the big data analysis have shown that it's less than 5%. And of that 5%, they're counting stuff like blocking traffic as violence. And they're also, of the instances, you know, aside from the blocking traffic and the few small instances were mainly caused by right-wing provocateurs, right? And these cops getting shot in Louisville, like I said, I think it sounds like it's some sort of hit job. The way they set it up, that they announced days in advance, hey, we're going to be giving the decision from the grand jury, so don't riot or anything.
And they
boarded up all the windows. The way they did that, that's unprecedented, right? Like, makes me think they were setting up for that so they could try to do, oh, look, violent protesters shot cops. Like, the whole thing is violence and needs to be silenced. And the cops we've seen, the cops are endorsing Trump. They're on board with this shit. Like, the cops are the bad guys. Like, they're the white supremacists that we keep talking about. It's the cops. Like, that's the vanguard for the far right, you know, coup. If there's a coup, it's going to be the cops leading the way, you know.
Well,
like,
just to go in on a little bit of a different direction. On the other side now, you have something that's a little bit overdue with the KHive coming under some criticism finally for some of their toxic behavior, which was we well know from the primary. That was the kind of mark that the media tried to put on us, on
So
Bernie supporters.
disingenuous. Yeah.
And now the KHive is it got this hit in the Huffington Post that some of its members have crossed a line from ardent fandom to overt harassment.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, well, just to go
That's
into it a little bit.
They've always been like that.
It says 19-year-old was a big fan of Kamala Harris and loved discussing the use of the then presidential candidate online. But after some research, he decided Harris was no longer his candidate. And a tweet popped up on his phone, and excuse me, but we don't need you fags anyway. That tweet popped up on his phone from this person that was identifying them as a member of Harris's digital army of fans, dubbed the KHive. The organized fan group is an online community of ardent Harris supporters who back the Democratic senator from California. Yeah, and actually, this was the mom that came to her son's defense, thinking that it was just like a few online trolls. There was nothing that hadn't been on Twitter, but then things got really ugly. And self-identified members of the KHive started replying or retweeting Jeffrey's tweets about her son. Jeffrey said, which led to her getting swarmed when anywhere from several to dozens of accounts started tweeting at or retweeting one person at the same time. They used her past tweets as being a victim of sexual assault and domestic abuse to harass her.
This is the mom, right?
Yeah, this is the mom now. This is the mom defending her son, and this is what the KHive went ahead and did. Multiple people also told her that she should try to kill herself, citing prior tweets in which she discussed having suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, they're so fucking terrible. These people are disgusting. Like, everything they said about Bernie Bros is actually the Hive. It always has been. And like we saw with Ryan this week, like we should probably tie that in. Like was a major offensive trying to attack Ryan Knight.
Yeah,
like, I don't know how that originated.
Like 20 years ago.
Exactly. But in that exchange, I don't know if you caught this part, it was revealed that he was at one time a paid operative. He was being paid $20K a year to tweet stuff for the Dems.
Right.
Which makes you see that these people, that's who these KHive people are, right? They must be on the take. It's like that 19-year-old, right? It sounds like he found out about, like, got into politics because he was into Kamala. And then once he started occupying political spaces and, being able to look around and see shit, he realized, wait a minute, everybody but Bernie is a scumbag. There's literally only one good politician. Everybody else is corrupt, right? And
they included some words from a few other KHive members that were attempting to go ahead and clear up some things from the group. And this was a word from Mr. Chris Evans, a KHive member with over 55,000 followers on Twitter. I've seen a lot of situations where people are KHive who were going through difficult things, medically, financially, emotionally, whatever the case might be, and a lot of us will rally around them and support them. Now, this
you want a pat on the back for that, for being a normal non-sociopath?
Well, I mean, I don't even know about them being.
He is clearly, right. That Chris Evans guy is one of the worst, right? He presents himself as like some good guy, but he's
that's what the article tried to go ahead and put him as one of the good KHive people. But I mean, I have a screenshot here.
Fucking feed, like,
look
did they not feed. Like, they didn't have, like, they should have.
He's a well-known troll.
I know, but like, they had that Google Doc with like thousands of instances of them being just terrible from 2016 to now. Like, none of that stuff made the cut. Like, it was very selective in what they included in this article. There's so much more graphic, violent things they could have done.
And it's not like they didn't show something that was pretty graphic in itself with what they were doing, but just this tweet over here from Mr. Evans. Who are the gays that send Bree out on national television looking like a lunette from the big comfy couch? A damn mess. So, I mean...
Was that in the article?
No, that was not in the article. But it's just an example. I mean, if anybody that had any kind of interaction with KHive, you probably came across this dude and you know exactly what kind of troll he is.
And like, it went into... I remember the part from the article where they went on about that Warren supporter who they were saying like she was a Nazi and a white supremacist and shit.
Yeah.
And like, knowing how those Warren people are, they're like fucking rad libs, right? Like, they're super into the identity politics stuff. So they were probably really hurt by that. And that just showed, like, that's how that crowd rolls. Like, they immediately try to weaponize race or class, or not class, but sexual orientation, religion. They find something about you and then say you're a racist, you're a bigot, like, whatever they can do. And people respond to it like, people, they get shook by it, right? Like, people don't like being called racist, right? So they immediately go on the defensive, and it's like, you have to not take those people seriously, right? Like, that's what I've seen starting to catch on. But like, when somebody weaponizes race in that fashion, they're not a serious person, like,
Yeah.
And that's what those people do, because they know it gets a response, right? Like, people are immediately try to like protect themselves and like prove that they're not racist, and they, are on the defensive, right? It's like, that's the other thing that like the whole Bernie bro narrative did all along, was it put left on the defensive all the time. So we were constantly being polite to not be accused of being vicious Bernie bros, right? So that's the same kind of thing they're doing there, is trying to make you susceptible to their, them owning you.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things that really got me in that whole thing was they had that whole ad, right? And then they put that meme of Bernie where he's pointing a gun. He's like, "I'm no longer asking." Like, that's obviously just like shit posting like stuff that's not really meant to be any kind of malicious, but that's the way they're gonna go ahead and portray us. And it was not. This KHive stuff has been going on through the whole primary. It could have easily been a bigger story then, and it would have overshadowed a lot of the stuff that we were having to deal with. But
and it's the same thing with like libs everywhere too. It's because like, you don't see them fucking doxing right wingers. You don't see them doing this shit, like getting right wingers fired from their jobs. Like, they're doing this to the left because they feel they can bully the left. Like, they wouldn't do that to, like Jack Prostovic, right? People like that. Like, they wouldn't do that. And like, that's the kind of people who actually have skeletons in their closet. People on the left are like struggling, like single moms and like ex-junkies and like gig workers. And like,
the other thing that I just want to go one more point about Ryan Knight. I mean, the stuff they went and doxed him on was stuff he was doing when he was a lib.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good point. Actually, but I was a KHiver when I did this, so
right. I've become a much better person since I left the K. Well. All right, I guess we're at the point we're going to wrap up, and we got our history segment.
It's History Hour with Tony and Matt, where we talk about history. History time.
All right, so our history segment for this week, it has to deal with World War II, and one of our unsung heroes from that war that helped us defeat fascism. His name was Chips, and he was a World War II service dog, and he actually has a pretty harrowing story. There was a battle or a skirmish he was involved with, where he escaped one of his handlers that was under fire from a machine gun turret, and he charged through into where this bunker was, and he was able to go ahead and attacked that gun nest. He bit a bunch of the German soldiers and then he pulled the smoking machine gun from its base. And then afterwards, he dragged out one of the German soldiers by his neck, and his comrades ended up following him out with his hands up. Additionally, in the part of the skirmish, or within the same day of the skirmish, he helped bring in 10 German prisoners. And afterwards, for his actions, he was actually awarded a Silver Star and a Purple Heart. These are very distinguished medals, but they were
Silver
taken
Star
back.
Is for like bravery, right? That's like the highest bravery one, and then Purple Heart is obviously for injuries. So.
Yep. And he was injured.
He went in the foxhole and he scared the shit out of these Nazis and made them come out and surrender. Like, they didn't have guns or anything or knives. I don't know. Chips, man.
I mean, I don't know how. I mean, it has to be pretty base for them to walk out 10 prisoners and take down a machine gun. Yeah, I mean that's a hell of a movie right there. I'll say that.
Ideas. We should make a Chips meme with like him biting some Proud Boys or something.
Bunch of Nazis. Well, So anyway, so afterwards they took back those 2 medals because they said they couldn't give them to an animal, and he was rewarded posthumously 75 years after the fact, a special service medal for
Yeah.
dogs.
Trump should have given that other dog the reward when everyone made fun of him. Remember?
Yeah.
Who was that
I
dog? Was that the Al
forgot.
Qaeda? Not the dog that killed some terrorist, right? Like,
Yeah.
and they made those memes like he actually did it, and everyone thought he actually had done it. He should have said, "I'm changing the law so I can posthumously give Chips back his Silver Star."
And he's just his Silver Star and his Purple Heart. But so afterwards though, Chips gained some notoriety because he was there was a whole public meeting where he got to meet General Dwight D. Eisenhower, and the future president at that time bent down in order to go ahead and pet him, and Chips turned around and bit him because it was unbeknownst to Eisenhower that the dog had been automatically trained to clamp down and bite any human he didn't know.
What was up with the fucking dog's trainer though? Like, wouldn't you say like, "Oh, Mr. President," or General, "I got to keep this dog on a leash.
Right.
He's been trained in such and such a fashion." I wonder if they trained him like, how they train those dogs in like German now. Like I wonder if they trained the dogs in German back then too, and they had to like train them for the war.
I mean, he has to have been a completely, very, very well trained dog to do what he did.
I wonder if there's any video of him.
I'm not sure, but sadly, just 7 months after returning home to New York, Chips passed away, and his family had stated that they initially decided to volunteer him into military service because he had bitten a garbage collector.
I mean, I'm glad they did though, right? Like,
yep.
I
mean, obviously, you saved a lot of
fight against fascism.
I mean, and like you had brought up a point. Well, you had brought up a point pre-show, Matt, that at the end of the war, the Germans were kind of like, fuck it, we're losing anyway.
Yeah.
This was during the height of the war in Sicily, when we're trying to land in the middle of Italy,
Europe. This dog must have been so fucking based. Like, what do you? It's like the meme, right? Like the dog from the meme, like the muscular dog. It's like kids in the 80s, kids now. Like that's what I'm saying. We should make memes like that. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's some good material there with Chips.
Well, definitely. But all right, everybody. So that's our show for this week. Yeah. We have a couple of episodes out there on the podcast now. Our interview with Mike Vick of Indiana. You can go ahead and listen to that one that we have out. We have several episodes, and we got a little bit of a spike in viewers that y'all are checking out things.
Yeah, I wouldn't jinx it. Yeah, man, we got like a bunch of listeners, like 150 listeners in one day. That's pretty good. So keep listening, y'all. Like, we'll keep making content. It's a lot of fun. And I want to get to Trump's new healthcare plan. I need to go over it. He just came out with something today. I mean, just initially, like, it seems like it can't be, like, you would have to try to do worse than our current system. But, who knows? It sounds like, obviously the individual mandate's gone, and they're going to re-allow the junk insurance, it sounds like. But he also said that they did get the bargaining capabilities, so maybe the pharmaceutical prices will go down. So we'll see. Stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and get more into that in our next episode or webisode. One of those, we'll go ahead and get into more of these kind of stories that we don't always get to.
Well, yeah, I feel like we talk about healthcare a lot. We should probably cover this.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. Follow me at DJ Tom Hanks. Follow my boy at _ Tony Westside. And follow the show at Unelectable A. And tell your friends. Post it on your Facebook. Post it on your LinkedIn. Post it on your job resume. My favorite podcasts include Unelectable Airways. DJ
All right,
Tom
everybody.
Hanks, the God.
All right, everybody. We're out.
All right, later.